Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pump Up the Volume. If you're joining us again, welcome back. And if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Luis Daniel Munoz. I'm a medical doctor, previous independent gubernatorial candidate in the state of Rhode Island. And every week I'm joined with my fellow co-hosts, one of which is missing today, Mr. Bill Bartholomew from the Bartholomew Town podcast. He is actually performing for a Christmas special. But also my other fellow co-host, Mr. Scott Rotunda from WBOB 990. Community activist as well, and just constantly, challenging the status quo and asking the important questions as an independent media expert. And that's what I'll use for this show. We also have another independent media expert, Mr. Pat Ford, also co-founder of the Libertarian Party here in the state of Rhode Island, and founder of the Coalition Radio Network, which we're actually streaming through. So thanks so much, Pat, for giving us this medium and giving others the medium as well. So what do we do here on Pump Up the Volume? Well, that's exactly what we do, right? We raise the volume on issues that mainstream media is not necessarily focused on. Many of those issues have to do with grassroots efforts, if we're talking campaigns and movements to increase the amount of resources that are coming to communities that are often left unheard, but also just raising the volume on the important questions that are not being asked during this particular crisis, which we know started as a health crisis, which we're still in, but also has quickly become an economic crisis as well. There's been a lot of updates over the last 7 days, as you might imagine, both here in the state of Rhode Island in terms of how we're confronting COVID-19, also on the national front with movements around the pharmaceutical industry, with vaccines coming out to having been approved already by the FDA, and also just general politics, right, with the stimulus package, the second one that is now moving forward, which is great news. But when we dig into the numbers, the question is, how great is it for the average working family that still has 3 to 6 months to deal with this crisis, or the small micro business? Let me be clear, the micro business that is struggling to even stay open and still likely has about 6 months before this vaccine hits the general population. So those are the issues and topics I think that we're all aware of, but are you asking the right questions? Is the mainstream media asking the right questions? And who should we be asking the questions to? Clearly at these pressers, not much pressure is being put on the administration. I know that Bill Bartholomew and Pat Ford certainly try, but given one question alone, it's hard to get all the answers that we need. So that's my opener for today. We are kind of at a restart, right, of where we were in the spring, not with the COVID numbers, but really with the resources. So we have this additional wave of resources coming in, and another 6 months likely dealing with COVID-19 and a possible mutation that we're seeing in the UK, which might impact the United States, given that not every state is closing or stopping travel from the UK. And so with that, I want to open up the table and really get Scott and Pat's take on what they've learned in addition to those things over the past week that maybe we should focus on. And once we do that, once we give Pat and Scott a minute or two to add, let's start really tackling some important questions, which might be nuanced, right? Like circumstantial, like how do we confront this particular situation here in the state of Rhode Island? I know Scott has a question. So once Pat and Scott go, Scott, you can lead us off with that question that you asked before the show. And I think it's an important one to talk about today. Is that cool?
Sure, man.
Awesome. All right, sounds great. All right, Pat, so you want to go first on just anything else to add, anything that you'd like us to try to tackle before the show's over today?
Yeah, I was the lone indie guy at the presser today. Mr. Bartholomew was otherwise engaged in one of his many media jobs, filling in on WPRO, the big 630. And Mr. Hummel has taken a well-deserved week off. So I found myself in the center of the storm, if you will, surrounded by voracious mainstream media types who last week, most of whom couldn't take the time to actually understand the back and forth, the repartee that Ms. Raimondo and I had. And the Senate was astonished to find that they did a superficial reading, read the spun, and in one case, a representative of Channel 12 actually did the bailout interview, which was shocking, given the chance. So, if I could just talk about the controversy last week, as we spoke in last week's show, the Ms. Raimondo was caught, if you will, flat-footed, attending a restaurant in Providence. Now, that, again, just to repeat briefly, that is not a violation of the law or violation of the intent. Well, the restaurant was at 33%. She was eating, and it was clear that she was wearing a mask when she wasn't eating. But it went against the spirit, if you will, of what I call the fear factor. The fear factor during the purge, because I can't call it the pause, it's the purge. The fear factor during the purge was the 7-month buildup that if you go outside, you will die, and your friends will die, and most importantly, you will watch in slow motion your children die. Sorry if I'm being facetious about such a deadly serious subject, but I have to be at this point, because if not, I'll go insane. Unfortunately, Ms. Raimondo chose to go to a restaurant, and I don't believe in accidents, at a restaurant that was hosting a paint night. Now, the regulations were very strict during the purge that one would not host entertainment. And I spoke to a number of restaurateurs who would love to have trivia night, would love to have paint night, would love to have karaoke night, would love to have darts night. Anything to bring in folks so they can have an adult beverage, perhaps a bite to eat, and then share in the warm embrace, if you will, during this brutal winter time of a cozy Providence night spot. Something I'd like to do. But that was the rules that she set forward, and that's why there was all the Sturm und Drang about it. And of course, after realizing that ruh-roh, we got caught, probably not thinking it through. I don't know. I can't begin to understand, if you will, the thought processes, if I can dignify our reaction to COVID with that term. Anyway, we went through that last week. Well, I had the opportunity to ask Ms. Raimondo in this past week's presser, which was Friday, after our show. And much, as Mr. Rotondo can attest, much hilarity ensued. At which point, the media machine of Ms. Raimondo was rolled out. And what's astonishing, and this is, in a sense, it is a minor issue, but it's not. Because remember, the government of the state of Rhode Island has sought over the last 8 months or so to do nothing less than permanently alter the behavior of the citizens of the state of Rhode Island in a number of facets. Number one, which is to, again, inject fear into them going out. That's a separate issue. But what's equally at stake here is the truth. And I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, the big lie, if you say something often enough, it becomes the truth. So the governor would, when presented during my little soliloquy, I presented her with her own regulations. I read them to her. And she completely ignored it and said, I was out to dinner with my husband. And then I read it a second time, but I was out to dinner with my husband. So the point being, in Rhode Island government, as in the national government now, the game is simply ignore the truth, bull ahead with whatever messaging you want to create. And what was appalling was the laziness, the out-and-out laziness from Channel 6, WPRO, Channel 12, who simply didn't bother to address the point. They went with the messaging of the Raimondo administration to the point where, after the presser, an interview was arranged with one of the leading and actually esteemed investigative reporters of the Providence Journal, who had this, there was the gauzy lighting, the near tearful admission by the governor that she might not be able to go out to eat to dinner, with her husband again. All of that, it was utter nonsense. It was either laziness or a desire not to screw with what they worship, and they worship at the altar of public access. I have another term for it, but this is family radio. So it's disturbing to see a governor spend months maintaining a narrative. It's disturbing to see a governor then issue additional laws which essentially work to bankrupt the declining business base left in the state, while at the same time incapable of providing any direct evidence that properly established, properly cleaned, properly distanced businesses can't engage in some level of commerce without exchanging the dread COVID. Whether it be gyms or some of these restaurants, there are no statistics from the state of Rhode Island that, through the contact tracing, establish on any large scale or any moderate scale a relationship between the two. So, it's just terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And we saw that today because, number one, the governor announced to everybody that her purge had worked. no real evidence. Number two, that in fact the people protesting outside, which were the people involved in weddings and all that in the state, and a critically important industry, as the wedding business and the event business drives a significant portion of our tourism business and our restaurant business. So the governor at this point, and the governor of Rhode Island, can issue these edicts, or they can make these pronouncements, and there is absolutely no attempt by conventional media at any level to distinguish whether this is truth, or as we like to say on the Coalition Network, outright balderdash. And I don't know what's more appalling. I know it's more appalling the life and the toll that this disease has taken on families and the loss of loved ones. I know it's appalling that the economic carnage continues to reign unabated despite $1 billion from the federal government. But I will say that in its own place in space, what is nearly equally appalling as all that is the new direction of Rhode Island government, which is we will look you in the eye and we will simply lie. And all the apparatus, the media apparatus in the state will, like the sheeple they are, will fall right in line and fall behind. Scott?
Yeah, like it's definitely we're seeing a double standard, right? Now I will say, the fact is we need to protect families, right? I don't know if you heard Tom Cruise's rant the other day, but I thought it was interesting because while it was put out there to work against Tom Cruise, I guess, where he was pretty much flipping out on his employees because they were breaking the 6 feet of distance rule. I mean, without a doubt, I think you should respect people more than that. He was using some foul language. I think that is a result of this anxiety that's built up with business owners as well, right? Which is if I do anything wrong, not only am I losing my ability to provide for my family, but my employees will not have a means to provide for their families, right? And that's the pressure that business owners are experiencing. And so that was really real. I mean, right? Like, while it was put out there to be kind of comedic and a hit piece, I felt like, well, that's exactly what a lot of small business owners are feeling right now. That's
Absolutely.
the pressure. And where I'm concerned with this administration is in not leading by example, right? If everybody needs to eat porridge, the governor should be the first one to eat porridge. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's not about right or wrong at this point. It truly is about just leadership. It's about, like, if you are expecting others to, reduce going out, to reduce the likelihood that they would go out, to not go to restaurants. If you are seeing that in places like Providence and Central Falls, restaurants are being closed down because the positivity rate is too high, then even if you could make it to a safe place on the east side, don't do it. Lead by example. Don't put yourself out there to do what? To just show that you represent and reflect privilege. And I'm not saying that if you work hard, you shouldn't be able to enjoy the things in life, but you put yourself in a position to lead. So lead. And that's been my concern from the beginning. And it can, to your point, Pat, continues to be my concern. And just to look back to one of the things you said, Pat, we look at spending, the CARES Act expenditures, and even field hospitals. Really annoying, right? To see that there was some cronyism going on there. There were these special relationships. The price tag on those field hospitals in the spring was ridiculous. We knew that we were going to do distance learning anyway. We had the capacity at the collegiate level to do that in the beginning. Let's not even talk K through 12. CCRI could have been shut down late spring without everything, just shut down, everything remote. And for the most part, it was. And we could have turned some of those facilities into field hospitals, right? It might probably micro satellite little clinics, but whatever the case is, I mean, there would have been a smarter way to spend $1 million using public facilities rather than renting out private facilities that ultimately just, for the most part, that first $1 million just went nowhere, right? Because the field hospitals were taken down before they were brought up again. And what could we have done with $1 million in that case in terms of micro entities throughout the state? Maybe Dan McKee wouldn't have been out there asking for 10 Gs per business if we had just made the right move in the late spring. So I just wanted to, you brought up some important points, Pat. I did want to, reaffirm, that we could have, should have, and continue to believe that we can do better, but this administration continues to ignore any steps to do that. So Scott, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've got some thoughts. I want to, actually a question that I think the media won't ask the governor, that should be asked. And I just want to dig into the why they won't ask the tough questions, kind of to build on Pat's point. As I talked about in the last episode, we are a one media market state with one party rule. So if WPRO or WJAR or WPRI or any of those news sources really held Gina Raimondo's feet to the fire, and again, to say, you know what, like you said, Lewis, you put yourself out there as a leader. You wanted the job. We've given it to you twice. Lead by example. Lead from the front. To ask those hard-hitting questions, they would be locked out of, to Pat's point, the altar of public access. Like a WJAR going after Governor Raimondo. Right now, they're kind of number one with a bullet in the Providence market. They'd go down to the bottom. They'd be shut out. That would be it. That's why. But the question I would like to see asked by anybody is, Governor Raimondo, what was the purpose of this 3-week pause? Okay, anything you do, like in my job, if I call a meeting, it has a purpose. If I'm having my team do something, there has a purpose. This is what I'm hoping to see accomplished. I still don't understand what the purpose of this pause was, or as Pat says, the purge, other than to just give one more karate chop to the throat of small businesses. And that was even evidenced by, you want to talk about a lack of common sense, setting up a COVID testing site at the mall the weekend before Christmas. I might not be the smartest guy in the room, but that's an awfully stupid idea. You almost wonder if they did that on purpose to get a spike. I don't want to be the tinfoil hat Alex Jones Newsmax people here, but you wonder if they did that on purpose to get a spike in the numbers to do another lockdown and to really, like you're stepping on a cigarette butt, kind of step on small businesses all over the state. That's something I would like to know about. And another thing that I've been wondering that we talked about before the show came on, now that we have these vaccines out, even though they're not fully approved by the FDA, what legal or ethical concerns do you think we could see if, for instance, let's say your business, right, your CEO decided to try to mandate, she or he decided to mandate that you have to get the vaccine before coming back into the office. Where does that, trample on individual rights? Do you think you'd see some sort of executive order from the Biden administration mandating people get a vaccine? And if they did, do you think that's the way to go? Or do you think, again, that gives more fuel to the fire for tinfoil hat people? Full disclosure, I will be taking the vaccine when it comes out. I don't know about you guys, but just getting that out there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up those points, Scott. Just to touch on a few things. It's interesting, what I've noticed with this administration, especially speaking with some of the leaders for these various streams of testing, stream contact tracing, stream, workforce, whatever, is they develop this like phrase or sentence, and then they latch onto it, and they don't know when to let go. It's just this interesting dynamic where meet them where they are. We started to hear that in the beginning of the summer. We need to meet them where they are. And one by one, I started to hear more of these individuals in the administration saying, meet them where they are. And it like became contagious. And then you see the results of that, which is common sense goes out the window because we want to meet them where they are. If they go to the supermarket, we want to be there. If they go to the mall, we want to be there. Now, with the supermarket, when you go to a Pawtucket Stop and Shop and you see a pop-up testing site, which is pretty much a box in the parking lot towards the back of the parking lot, that makes sense to me, right? Like, so you're meeting them where they are. Someone may be not feeling too well. They didn't know they were sick. They ended up going shopping, which anyway put people at risk. But at that point, they realize that they can walk to this box at the other side of the parking lot and get a test. Okay, makes sense. But you're going to place a testing pop-up site indoors in a place where people are shopping. I mean, where's the common sense in that? But again, this administration latched on to meet them where they are, independent of where if where people are, healthy people are, is actually going to lead to the transmission of this disease. That, yeah, I just wanted to hit on that meet them where they are. They need to just let go. Like, this administration needs to let go of that. Also, in terms of the legal repercussions, right, for the vaccine, I think what's interesting here is the Republicans at the national level, the Senate, the senators and congressmen that represent the Republican Party right now are the ones really advocating for protections for small businesses and micro entities around COVID-19. So liability protection, right? Or liability, like pretty much protections to avoid having to use their liability insurance for lawsuits that are going to come up for people that were infected right around the area of a business when they went to do a transaction. And I think this kind of aligns with that to some extent, Scott, right? Like, I think that if we were to run into situations where businesses would, even if they're private businesses, would feel like you're mandated to get this vaccine, if there is no protection for those businesses, and I think there's a legitimate legal argument there then, because I think at that point, the liability for that business, I mean, it increases, right? I mean, just because now they can get sued if they cannot protect their customers. So I'm not a lawyer, but I think that there's actually probably some legal stance there. But I think that's something that probably is being weighed now at the national level. And in general, though, what I would say is we know that there are places that do have mandatory vaccinations at this point anyway, right? Schools, even colleges, private colleges as well, because of liability. Meningococcal, right, disease. We've seen it with students that go into dormitories, and that can kill. So there's a precedent to show that there are grounds to mandate vaccinations in certain settings, like congregate settings. And there's also the individual has the freedom to just not live in the dorms, right? So I think that there's a number of things can happen. What I'm interested, I think the more complicated scenario though is if you have an individual that is just against vaccinations, right? Just generally against them, and they're working in a non-healthcare business, and there are protections for businesses to not get sued. In that scenario where there's really no increase in risk to the business and from a liability standpoint, there's still this question of ethics and morals, which I would agree. I mean, my position would always be take it to protect others, but in general, like, in that context, how should that happen? Because there's a few things that would happen. One, the person would have to agree. Two, the person would then have to agree to share their health information with the business. And those are two different things, right? I don't have an answer, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out at the national level with whether businesses will be protected, and then the consequences of that will likely play into one of these scenarios.
Well, if I can jump in for a second, I mean, they need to be protected. I mean, if you're going to indemnify vaccine manufacturers, developers, whatever, from virtually any legal threat, then where's the equality here? Where's the fairness? I mean, if Pfizer or any of these organizations, God bless them for taking the risk. I mean, that's capitalism. They invested a tremendous amount of money with no guarantee that there would be a return. That's capitalism. But at the same time, they get to operate scot-free if the disease gets out there, and all of a sudden we're not reenacting I Am Legend, or it ain't cosplay if all of a sudden you got genetically re-engineered coyotes running down the streets of Providence. So I'm being a little facetious. Not much.
We were also talking about the restaurant owner, not the pharmaceutical company.
Oh, but what I'm trying to draw as a parallel. If the restaurant owner, a restaurant owner who has been deemed to be running a restaurant in if you will, in the spirit of the COVID era, where they're distancing, they put up the plexiglass, and they've done everything according to the plan, they absolutely should be indemnified from any risk. And that's my point. We go through hoops to make sure the pharmaceutical companies aren't at risk. Why would we allow business owners for whom can't control the air literally flowing into their restaurants, can't control the people who will outright lie to you? I mean, there's people. There's already there's a league of COVIDiots out there who will just, they'll prove positive, and since there's no registry, and there shouldn't be, they'll just go to work anyway. They're important. So you bring up a very valuable point. We absolutely need to indemnify small business from being sued because someone caught COVID allegedly in their place of business.
Well, there's a couple of things. So I just want to be very clear what I'm saying here. So the FDA still approved for emergency use, right, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. There was an actual government entity looking at data, going through some level of quality assurance, understanding that, I don't know how good that could be given how quickly this was pushed out, but there was that. We technically have the DOH that should be going through walkthroughs in businesses. We know and we've heard across the state it's not really happening. It's just not. They're picking at random a sample of businesses and then walking through. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Pat, is I do think that there's a very small percentage, but still a present, number of businesses where the owners are just choosing not to take any precaution, right? Some of those owners, very small percentage, do think this is a hoax. I've met some of those business owners, right? So I just generally want to say that if anyone is just blatantly not taking just any precautions, they're saying that this is a hoax on social media. They are letting 100 people go into a room that you're only supposed to have 75, right? Without mask. I don't know. I'm really up in the air about that scenario, and I frankly think that business owner, should at a minimum get fined, at a minimum. And if people were to die as a result of that, we saw with the nightclub, right, 400 people this summer. If someone were to have died from that, I wouldn't be opposed to that going to trial, because again, these business owners, and look, this is giving credit to business owners. They are leaders. They are also leaders in the community to some extent, right? They are marketing, they are pushing their message, they are saying that they have some type of essential service, and they are pulling people into their businesses. And I think that business owners, all of the ones that are in my circle, feel like they, customer service is everything, protecting their customers. They feel like they have a duty to their customers that the product be good. And so I want to be very clear, there are so many business owners out there that are trying to protect customers. And I think that we should do everything possible to ensure that we have a fair system for them and that they are protected. But there's a percentage that aren't, a small percentage. And we need to draw a clear distinction in terms of how we deal with those cases. I need to put it out there because when I hear about businesses just not really, not caring about whether this is real or not, or the impact it has on lives, it just doesn't sit well with me. Anyway, that's my bit of a rant there.
No, and listen, I'll just throw this out there. There are business folks, if you're in the sound of this show, and you hear this either today or in replay over the next few days, there's a real opportunity here. Businesses should, and this is where capitalism comes into play, should be attempting to differentiate themselves based on the level of cleanliness that their business exhibits. The gentleman who owns the gym, Matt D'Amico, points out, and I told him, you need to publicize this, points out that his equipment had already been spaced appropriately so that people wouldn't be banging into each other, that they've got a rigorous wipe down and cleanup both ongoing during the day and after hours. Restaurants should be advertising this to the high heavens. We're the cleanest damn restaurant. It used to be the coldest beer, right? The best. What would the elf say? The best cup of coffee in the world? No, we are the cleanest damn restaurant in the province. And this is what we do because of our concern for our customers. And there is a halo effect that can come from that, which will increase your business. And that's why they're there, to make money. Yeah. Hooray. Sorry.
So no worries, Pat. But you you brought up the vaccine. I wanted to bring up something too, like because you did mention I Am Legend. I just want to. I don't want any of our listeners to like not hear me acknowledge, right, that again, I'm a medical doctor. I will be taking the vaccine. I understand that there are also differences in some of the vaccines, and we can have conversation about what those differences are, the implications they might have, and understanding that there are things that we might see in the future which we don't see now, because that's science and we learn with time, right? So I do not believe we're going to turn into zombies, people. There's right, just to put that out there. I will say my preference based on what I have read, and I would love to see more data, would be to take the Moderna vaccine. Reason is there's some indication that the Moderna vaccine may actually prevent you from becoming infected with COVID-19, which is different from the Pfizer vaccine, where Pfizer will prepare your immune system to fight it, but you may still become infected. And because you're infected and able to fight it, that's great for your life. But because you're infected, you could also transmit the disease to someone else. Versus the Moderna vaccine, if the data shows that this is in fact true over time, you would not be infected with COVID-19, right? So you would have some protection, your immune system would be boosted up, but it could actually prevent you from becoming infected, meaning that the likelihood that you would transmit it to someone else is lower, right? Because you're not infected with COVID-19. So that's a scenario that I like better because, again, it not only protects me, but it helps to protect others. There are also other vaccinations coming out. We know that AstraZeneca might be coming out with another vaccine. Its effectiveness will be lower, much lower than Pfizer and Moderna. Now, since you brought this up, Pat, it's an important point because in the Equity Council meeting this past week, one of the questions that I asked, I said, how will you have an option as to which vaccine you can get? The answer, however nicely it was coded, was really no, right? No, you won't be able to go up and say, I want the Moderna versus the Pfizer or the Pfizer versus the AstraZeneca. And that's really where equity comes up in this battle. So just moving forward, let's set all the people that want to refuse to take a vaccine aside. As of now, that's your choice. And then let's now focus on all the individuals that want to take the vaccine. Please keep your antennas up. At the end of the day, these vaccines are somewhat different. The effectiveness of the AstraZeneca vaccine and maybe possibly others that might come out down the line vary in effectiveness, meaning the likelihood that they would help you build your immune system up to combat COVID-19 is different. Like how effective they are doing that is different. Moderna and Pfizer, 95% effective, great. AstraZeneca, they're saying around 70%. That's not really great. But AstraZeneca's vaccine, if it does get cleared by the FDA, would be really cheap. And you think about what the decisions that the federal government and state government here in Rhode Island have done over the past 9 months, where they can cut costs, where they can cut corners, it always seems to be a path. And that's an equity issue. Why is it an equity issue? Because who will get the Pfizer? Who will get Moderna? Who will get AstraZeneca? Right now, the answer is clear, right? Healthcare workers, essential workers, first responders. No one is debating that, right? They are on the front lines. But when they all get their second shot, and it's time for the general population to get shots, who will have which vaccine? Will it be based on the healthcare system that you're able to access? Because if so, healthcare systems are placed in different geographies, and different geographies have different towns and cities around it here in the state of Rhode Island, and they're different economies. And frankly, like certain levels of economic status associated with those places, will ultimately those decisions be driven by the healthcare system or by the state? And even if it's driven by the state, unfortunately, I don't know if the state of Rhode Island will have an equitable allocation of resources, given that they haven't even had an equitable allocation of capital over the past 9 months. So these are all questions I'm putting out there with a little information around vaccinations, because the battle that we have ahead is different, but it's not much smaller than the one we're facing now. It's still going to be a battle for healthcare resources, for capital for our businesses to survive, but also, generally speaking, it's going to be just a battle to not get drilled, like not get buried under the cost of healthcare. Because I think that's really going to be the measure by which they decide these things. It's going to be that, the hospital can't afford it, and the communities that the hospital is serving cannot afford to pay their hospital bills, which will likely be very high after COVID-19, right? Like that's going to be the rationale. And that's what we have to fight against. And that's not only a fight against like a certain administration, that's actually a fight against insurance companies. Here, how the deals that we make with health insurance companies in Rhode Island, across the US as well. And then it becomes a fight with the pharmaceutical companies. But we all know what the pharmaceutical companies want, which is money. So at least you know what they are. But do not be fooled by hospitals and insurance companies that are making these decisions in conjunction with the state administrations that will have a real impact on your lives. So again, really provided a lot of information there. Sorry to take up all the time, Scott. I do want to give Scott some time to add in here, but I did not want to, leave that unmentioned on this call, given that we do have a lot of conversation about vaccinations these days. Scott?
No, I mean, I definitely back up what you said, and you're right. It is going to be interesting to see who gets what vaccine. Are they going to cheap out on us or what? I think that really remains to be determined. I wouldn't be surprised, if they do. If we all get that the AstraZeneca, as you said, which is about 70% effective. Also, I just want to talk a little bit about the stimulus package winding its way through the Byzantine chambers of government right now. And they're talking about a $600 direct payment to most people. Just doing a little bit of research. The average price of a 2-bedroom apartment in Rhode Island is about $1,400 a month. So if you have two parents who have been out of work for a few months, you're basically giving them, it's not even a month's rent. If they have a kid and they need a 2-bedroom apartment. So I just debate what this $600 is supposed to do for anybody. And one thing that needs to be a question that needs to be answered on my end is this stimulus payment also going to be taxable, right? Because in that case, you're providing even less help to ordinary Americans. Here's a few $100 right now, but you got to pay me back some of it in April. I mean, come on. It's just I think it's a question that's got to be asked as well.
By the way, there are reports coming in right now as we speak that President Trump has actually sent the stimulus bill back to Congress, citing the egregious foreign policy payments as well as the low amount of payouts to individual Americans. Fascinating. What do you think about that, Scott?
I think it's probably a last PR play by the president. Honestly, I would like to see someone, if you're going to do a stimulus package at all, trim down some of the foreign aid payments and boost up the payments to American men and women who really need it. Like I said, I mean, $600 a piece right now. If you're going to do it, it's not even worth doing at that point. That's maybe a grocery bill for a few weeks. It's definitely not going to help someone with their rent payment. It's not going to help someone who was in the service industry and has had their business squashed by COVID-19. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, granted, because Trump pushed it back, Congress is just going to ignore what he's saying anyway because he's a lame duck. But we'll see where it comes out.
But look, like 600 is ridiculous, right? And look, we have, this will happen people will start getting medical bills for those ER visits, right? Those bills will be $1,200 bills. This is, I mean, beyond rent, beyond food, which we know people need more for, we are going to, it's just crazy to me that, these stimulus packages do so much for big business. They do so much for connected, not only nations, but, just generally, like if you look at the way that states allocate funds based on existing contracts and the relationships between the contractors and the state administrators, right? Like everything goes to the people on the top. And then to think about the $600 and what it means, right? Because even if that's an emergency fund, even if someone is still making it by barely, and the 600 feels like cushion, like if we get another 2 weeks of lockdown, that'll help us, right? Because there's a lot of families that are right there as well. They're right in the middle. They're like, oh, thank God, $600. This is 2 hospital visits, 1 ambulance drive, 2 grocery, two times at the grocery shop. And then suddenly you get a medical bill, right? And you get a medical bill and it's not even for you. It's because you were taking care of your mom who was older than 65, right? And then, you're pretty much the provider, like that. And then where does it go? It goes back to the hospital, back to the insurance company.
If you really wanted to do a package, and you can debate whether government should be in the stimulus business or not, but given that there is going to be some sort of stimulus package done, why couldn't we do something like this? Like I just mentioned, the average cost of a 2-bedroom apartment is about $1,400 in Rhode Island. What if you did this? What if you said for families making under a certain dollar amount, their next 2 rent payments were forgiven? I don't mean added to the end of their lease. I mean forgiven, marked off as paid, right? And you also make the landlord whole, because don't forget, if I own a 3-decker building in Pawtucket, I have a mortgage on that property. So if no one's paying me, how the hell am I supposed to pay the mortgage? So you say, okay, we'll forgive 2 months rent on everybody making under X amount of dollars, and the people that money is owed to, the landlords, they get to take that off of their mortgages. Again, just forgiven. So now think about that family again that's struggling, and now for 2 months, probably the biggest bill that they have, their rent, is taken care of. That's a hell of a lot better than $600. And you could turn around and make that tax deductible too for let's say a landlord that forgives a month's rent for a tenant, they get to deduct that from the tax, or from a mortgage company that deducts that, forgives a month of mortgage for someone who owns a home. And yeah, I mean, the big businesses like the Wells Fargos and whatever, yeah, they'll get tax breaks out of it. But the people that'll help the most is, again, that 2-income family that's struggling right now. Maybe the husband and wife are making about 30 or 40 grand a piece, and they're struggling to make that $1,000 monthly nut on their rent, and you've forgiven it for 2 months. That is a much bigger boom.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a great idea.
What if someone? I'm sorry, go ahead, buddy.
Well, that's a great idea, and it's interesting because Jack Ree was on Gene Valicenti's show today, and no good ideas. Seriously, we are sent, and I know that White House is out there trying to say that there's dark money when he was taking it for years, but at the same time, they're not proposing ideas that even in the state of Rhode Island, given our size, could really, an idea like that could be proven in a very short amount of time in terms of its impact, right, on a community, on communities. And what's interesting, though, at the federal level is there's also this debate. I don't know if you read the article about the tax deduction now that the Republicans are trying to put in the stimulus package, which would be for meal expenditures. And that was up for debate, which is why, they call it the martini, the martini clause or something like that. On one hand, I see that, yeah, you get these really rich business people that are going out and spending thousands of dollars for dinner. Of course, they'd love to have some type of special tax treatment for that. But to your point, Scott, why couldn't a Democrat like Reid have injected that idea that you just mentioned into it, right? The logic stream's the same, it's the same logic stream. It's just really more tailored to the current situation, but they don't do it. And it's like, we're in a blue state without blue ideas. And it blows my mind.
And I think it goes back to Pat's point too of the media coverage not being, not really. It's just coverage. It's just an extension, a PR extension for our elected officials. I mean, I did not watch Gene Valicenti's show, but I can imagine him sitting there and not asking any hard questions, basically saying, "Senator Reid, how come you're so dreamy?" Or something like that. I remember over a year ago, Mayor Drebian was on Gene Valicenti's show as he was at Loggerheads with Gina Raimondo. And I mean, honestly, it was almost like Valicenti had pom poms up and was just cheering for Gina, So why, to your point, Dr. Munoz, why should they come up with anything new? They're not going to be pressed on any of it. I mean, I think, honestly, I think a Democrat here could probably propose to overturn Roe v. Wade and not get any pushback, for God's sake, because again, our media, such that it is in Rhode Island, mainstream media, is so afraid of being shut out of the halls of access.
Gina Raimondo might as well have a conversation about 1950s sitcom, which is what most of Gene Valicenti's shows become on a daily basis, than have a conversation about actual policy. It's a farce. It's an absolute farce. These people will become caricatures of themselves or an embarrassment. Listen, to me, this is the ultimate sin. I'm blessed, and this is kind of, we'll talk hopefully before the end of the show about a little year-end, or maybe next week, a little year-end thanks. I am blessed that somehow we've been able to pull together this coalition radio network through this year for a really difficult environment. I mean, we sought to be advertiser supported. There is no advertising money. It's just, people are barely making their bills, making their payroll. But I'm blessed to be surrounded by people who of integrity. We can have different opinions. We celebrate our differences in our opinions. And most importantly, we have hard conversations. The media in this state is just an embarrassment. They don't, you've got on a weekly basis, and I know I've told you guys this privately, you've got a sitting American governor of a state, albeit a small one, anywhere from 2 to 4 of her cabinet secretaries standing on a stage and an open mic for questions. And while there needs to be some sort of tangential relationship to the COVID crisis, you can ask just about anything. God knows I have, and they sit there and they have to answer them in some form, or in many cases they don't. And people, the smart people who are watching, call them out on it. Most of the media doesn't even send anyone to this press conference. How is that possible? I know, and I know this is an obsession of mine because, quite frankly, the coalition network is an obsession of mine. So there's bleed there. I get it, but holy cow! You all you need to see is that farce when the head of Department of Transportation comes on, once a month or whatever. And skip ropes his way through an abomination that his department represents and state governments represents. All you need to know is the ass kissing that goes on. It's just terrible. If things were great and everything was cozy here, I get it. But again, these guys have become literally caricatures of themselves. They need to grow a set. Sorry.
That's all right, Pat. That's why we're here. Here you go.
I'm working on the shyness thing, Doctor. Okay.
No, but in all seriousness, it's interesting. There's just so many more questions, right? I feel like for the past 3 weeks prior to this, it felt like we were getting to a place where we knew, right? We knew what was coming, and it was hope, and then the vaccine came. And in the midst of that, there's this new wave of questions now, and this new stimulus package. And so even though it's hopeful that a vaccine or vaccines, plural, right, will get us to a place where we can be safe, where we can not return to norm, but establish a new norm. The fact is there's mutation that was actually reported months ago. It wasn't just reported, 2 weeks ago. It was reported months ago. But it has now, one was actually tested and reported in Texas about the UK. But now the UK is reporting on this, they say a new strand. I don't know if a virologist would agree it's a new strand, but certainly something that's more transmissible. I think that they're the same, unless there's an additional mutation that made it transmissible, which Texas study showed was happening anyway. But in any case, we have that. So now there's an urgency to get the vaccine out faster because this thing spreads faster. And we have money, and less money is coming through than last time. We don't have a strong contact tracing force. Time is not going to fix that in Rhode Island. And we have people actually that economically are worse off than they were in March. They are hungrier than they were in March. And I mean, literally for some families. And 2022 is not around the corner, right? So they're stuck with the leaders they have for the next year and a half. Some leaders that have been very proactive at the local level, credits to them, but also other leaders that are not active at all. So the reason I'm posing these questions and I'm just acknowledging this is the next few weeks for us really has to focus on revisiting every single topic and conversation we've had since March. Who are the leaders that are doing something? What are they doing? And is it having a real impact on our lives, on the communities here in Rhode Island? And in digging through those questions, I'm sure that we're going to continue to revisit some of the topics related to small businesses, some of the topics related to food and vaccines. But I think we're going to start to see other things come up. Some of them, which I mentioned now, which are these new challenges with medical billing that are around the corner, but also evictions that might restart at the end of January. So in order to do that effectively, we're going to continue to be here with you. Starting the new year, we're going to try to have more guests on as well. I think it's important to get people that are out there in the battle, literally, blood, sweat, and tears coming on and really sharing their perspective and story and enlightening us, right? Because at the end of the day, we may all have our different expertise and we may bring it to the table, but as much as we know things, there are many things that we don't know. And I think every single one of us acknowledges that. And that's why this is a great team to work with. So with that, I want to, again, thank my co-host for joining me today. I hope that you all have a great holiday celebration. If you happen to not celebrate the holiday, then at least some good food, and some good movies. And for all of you out there, again, happy holidays. I do want to let my fellow co-hosts end the show, though, as we've done in the past. So let's start with you, Scott. Lift up anything that you're going to be doing in the next week, especially with news stories. And also, Pat, you can go after Scott. So.
Sure. Actually, so you can catch me every week on 990 WVOB from 8 to 9 p.m. This coming week, I am actually taking the week off, just right after Christmas, just to recuperate. So I'm looking forward to coming back in 2021 really strong with really awesome guest list, and hopefully we can put COVID in the rearview mirror.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Enjoy the vacay.
Well, we're going to be hitting it pretty hard this week at the Coalition Radio Network. Tomorrow night at 7:00, Tina Peterson is going to, we may be doing a best of, we're not sure yet, but we'll have our weekly show ramp. She is an award-winning advocate, nationally recognized for advocacy for people who are facing physical challenges, as she does herself so provocatively every day. At 8:00, Faith Dugan is going to be joining us. She is with an organization that we spotlighted today on the Coalition. They're called the Rhode Island Coalition of Weddings and Event Professionals. She'll be joining us to talk about her business. We have something on the Coalition now called the Rhode Island Business Focus, or Rhode Island Focus on Business, where we take local businesses. This will be supercharged because she is one of the leaders of this organization, demanding a seat at the table to get parity for her organization along with the restaurant business. And God knows I support them. But the restaurant business are, if you will, or they are the favorite sons, if you will, sons and daughters of the governor. They get a lot of support. The Coalition of Wedding Event Professionals has been left out to dry, literally, and they are an incredible group and have incredible impact on Rhode Island's economy, employ a lot of people, drive a lot of business to the state. At 9 o'clock, we're tentatively working on a show that's going to be discussing, if you will, Dr. Andy Hernandez. He is a professor at the Western New Mexico State University. He'll be joining us, hopefully, or folks like him, if you will, with his background, to join us to discuss some of the appointees and some of the movements of the nascent, if you will, Biden administration in terms of immigration justice. This, as a network, we support immigration justice here. We're open to conversations with folks of all backgrounds, but we work very hard here to support both refugees and immigrants to this nation. The Biden administration, some disturbing appointments. Now they're looking to take a little slowly in rolling back some of the terrible, and I mean terrible, human rights violations that constituted the Trump policy on immigration and refugee status. And that's just for beginners, folks. In the new year, as I mentioned, we're going to be firing it all up. We're going to turn up the heat on both local and federal government. We're going to light up, if you will, the political landscape in the state. So I just want to say, too, if folks don't listen next week, how proud I am to be part of Dr. Luis Daniel Munoz's effort here, Pump Up the Volume. The type of conversation, both provocative and accessible, that's taken place over here the last few months is nothing short of remarkable. And that is very much a function of the gentleman who's sitting digitally across the table from me, who hosts this every week. So looking forward to more. We are going to, across the Coalition Radio Network, if I can just for a moment hijack your show name, Dr. Munoz, we are going to pump up the volume here.
Thanks so much, Pat. And of course, it is, it's great to have you guys as friends and just to have you on the show and, to bring different perspectives into a conversation. And we challenge each other in subtle ways, but it tends to happen. So that's a good thing as well, right? That's how we grow. So with that, I just want to again wish everyone a Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Also, please stay safe out there. Be smart. Protect your families. And remember, there are questions that need to be asked. And hopefully this will inspire you to amplify those questions. But if and when you feel like you need some help in doing that, please reach out to us, communicate with us. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or on the Coalition Radio Network. Just message us. We're happy to take on that question and to amplify it for you. So with that, be safe, happy holidays, and we'll see you all next week. All right, thanks.